this. Because, human nature throughout history has basically been used to using violence to combat violence. Someone who's oppressed has usually tried to rise up and throw that oppression off by military violence of their own. And this must have been an unusual type of experience to try to deal with in what happened there.
And to be such a driving force in the 1960s in a culture that really didn't want to change. It had been going on for 200 years, 250 years, yeah. Racism, slavery,
right.
and the kind of society in the South really perpetuated that discrimination. He really exposed himself. Did he get inspired by others? Where did he get his inspiration?
Well, he drew his major inspiration from Jesus Christ. He was a minister, and he did preach and such as that, and he read the Bible, and he saw the example of Jesus Christ in terms of nonviolence, and that, of course, Jesus lost his life. So Martin Luther drew from the example of Jesus Christ.
What other ones would you mention in history?
Well, there's Mahatma Gandhi, who was leader of India, shortly after World War II time in the 1940s, late 1940s. And his was a very unusual case as well, because India had been subject to India like a colony, to Great Britain, India, the nation of India, to Great Britain for quite a number of years. And yet here was a man who was looking for independence for people, again, through very unusual means. Instead of taking up weapons, instead of having an insurrection, a rebellion, a military coup, that's been so common in our history, here's a man that had very high principles as far as his own life and inspired his followers, but through very unusual means.
Mahatma Gandhi early on had gone to England and been educated in England and had become really a disciple, as he would have said, of Jesus, the original biblical teaching. And that the reason why he didn't stay a Christian was he couldn't see any churches that followed what Jesus actually taught. But that he got his principles of nonviolence.
Yes.
From the teachings of Jesus, and then adapted them in order to free the Indian people. If you looked at any great actual hero of political leadership in Western history, who would you look at as somebody that gave his life for principle?
Well, one of our presidents, Abraham Lincoln, is one who is noted for his great sacrifice, and at extremely difficult time in the history of our nation, at the time of the Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln was striving to preserve the Union, keep the nation together instead of it just splitting into two parts. He was also trying to right a grievous wrong in terms of, he wanted to emancipate or free the slaves. And those points were such that he had a lot of detractors, a lot of people that, had hatred stirred up within them. And where did he was assassinated?
And where did he get his inspiration? I mean, when he looked back through history to do the kind of courageous acts, and inspired by what?
Abraham Lincoln was an avid reader of the Bible and took note of the examples in the Bible. And we have any number of quotations, from him to this day, some of which have become quite famous, in which he refers to the scriptures and the principles of the Bible that he tried to adhere to and to follow into practice.
So here we have Martin Luther King, we have Mahatma Gandhi, we have Abraham Lincoln, and they drew inspiration for the tremendous progress that came as a result of what they were responsible for teaching,
right,
in all of their nations, and yet they got it from the teachings of the Bible. It was a common source. Within the Bible, how would you look at the greatest examples of people who gave all for principle?
Well, very early in the history of humanity, there's righteous Abel. We read about in the first book of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, Abel was one who illustrated quite a remarkable attitude of service, rather than the very typical human nature, the get, what's in it for me kind of philosophy, and he was contrasted by the one who did him in, his brother Cain, who seemed to be very jealous and envious and concerned about himself. And so Abel ended up losing his life, being killed by standing up for his principles and by being a nonviolent individual as well.
Who else?
Well, John the Baptist is an example from the New Testament. John the Baptist preached a very strong message of repentance, an urgency for people to change their lives, to begin to get in accordance of living their lives the way that God instructs. And so he got into a situation where he was outspoken about Herod, local ruler at that time, and the adulterous marriage that Herod was involved in, and Herod's wife did not take kindly to that, but sought or searched for a way to see that John the Baptist was killed or assassinated, and John the Baptist literally lost his head. He was decapitated because of the situation that developed.
Speaking your mind about principles will get you in trouble, and these were all heroes. These were people who lived for truth, knew that truth would set others free, but unfortunately died in the process. But was that in vain? Do people who give their lives live again? It's an important question, and to people who love soldiers who are dying or who have died, or anyone else for that matter who lived lives of principle, it is an important issue. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about that. But first, do ask for the booklet. That we have a wonderful publication that goes through the whole biblical doctrine of what happens after death. You're going to see an ad for that. Simply call the 800 number. It's a non-sectarian offering. You don't have to belong to any particular church. That isn't the intent. It's in the interest of spiritual education for the general public that is published by the United Church of God. And do also ask for your free subscription to The Good News, a spiritual magazine of understanding. It is, again, non-denominational. You won't ever be asked to join anything, but you will be asked to open up your mind and think deeply about good news. And we'll be